Well, good afternoon. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the 139th Landon Lecture on Public Affairs. The Landon Lectures were started in 1966 by the late Governor, Alf Landon, and the late K-State President, James McCain. The goal of the Landon Lectures is to bring the most prominent public figures in the world to Kansas State University to discuss the pressing issues of the day. We are very pleased this afternoon to welcome Ambassador Ryozo Kato. We are very happy to have him at the Landon podium today to join 138 predecessors in bringing his thoughts and opinions on important public issues. Before introducing Ambassador Kato, I would like to introduce other members of the platform party. On my left, Dr. Tom Harrell, Professor of Animal Science and Industry and President of the Kansas State University Faculty Senate. Next to him, Mr. Michael Burns, a senior in agricultural economics and our outstanding student body president. Then on my right, Mr. Edward Seaton, chairman of the Landon Patrons and editor-in-chief and publisher of the Manhattan Mercury. And then next to him, Dr. Charles Reagan, associate to the president and chairman of the Landon Lecture Series. Before introducing Ambassador Kato, I would like to introduce, and this is always so much fun and a great privilege, our former but very extraordinarily excellent U.S. Senator Nancy Kassebaum Baker. Please. There she is. Now, I think you all know from reading the paper that Nancy and Senator Howard Baker were in Japan from 2001 to 2004, where Howard Baker was the American ambassador to Japan. But as we were talking at lunch, the ambassador felt like America had two ambassadors for the price of one. I'd also like to welcome in our audience Mr. Atsuru, First Secretary in the Japanese Embassy. Please. There he is right there. I am also pleased to introduce to you our very excellent Lieutenant Governor of Kansas, representing Governor Sebelius, John Moore. John, please. Thank you, John, for coming. Finally, I also want to welcome the Japanese liaison officer to the U.S. Army Combined Arms Center at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, Lieutenant Colonel Satoshi Shimano. Please. Well, this afternoon I'm very pleased to welcome to the Landon Lecture podium Ambassador Kato, the Ambassador of Japan to the United States of America. The ambassador has had a very distinguished diplomatic career, during which he has served as Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs, Director General of the Foreign Policy Bureau, Director General of the Asian Affairs Bureau, Consul General of Japan at San Francisco, Director of the Treaties Division, and also as a minister in the Embassy of Japan to the United States. As probably most everybody here in the room knows, Japan has the world's second largest economy, second only to that of the United States. I think, as most of you know, since World War II, we've had extremely positive and cordial diplomatic, political, and economic relations pretty much over the last half-century. Japan is a very important and pivotal trading partner for the United States and plays the leading economic role in the entire Pacific Rim region. So it is only fitting that Japan would appoint one of its most senior, most experienced, most capable ambassadors to their embassy in Washington, D.C. Ambassador Kato graduated from the Faculty of Law at the University of Tokyo and also holds a Master of Laws from the Yale University Law School. Ambassador Kato follows a long line of very distinguished foreign and political figures to come to the Landon podium. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the Japanese ambassador to the United States of America, Ambassador Kato. Thank you very much. Thank you.
President Wiefeld, Dr. Reagan, Mr. Seaton, and of course, Senator Nancy Kassebaum and Lieutenant Governor Moore. And thank you. I'm delighted to be here at Kansas State, the home of the Wildcats. And I love these T-shirts. I'm enjoying being around KSU students. You are much more interesting than the diplomats I normally deal with. So thank you for inviting me. And before I do anything else, I want you to know something right up front. The United States is Japan's best friend in the world. And while Japan has long been America's best friend in Asia, we are learning how to be a friend of the United States in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, which I will come to in a few minutes. Japan and the United States work most closely together in Asia. And that is what I would like to focus on this afternoon, on that part of the world that is far from the home of the Wildcats. Here on the plains of Kansas, I want to talk about geopolitics in Asia and East Asia particularly. In East Asia, the tectonic plates of geopolitical history are shifting. The rumblings you hear are forces of the past bumping against the future. Japan, whose economy remains 3 times that of China, has emerged from its post-war introversion and is becoming a much more internationally outward-looking country. China has emerged as a country of impressive economic growth, and it is developing the military power to match. Then we have North Korea, that mysterious black hole of the freedom, a country that has emerged from stable dictatorship to unpredictable dictatorship. Meanwhile, countries like South Korea and the Philippines remain part of the global trend toward democracy and capitalism. China is the only factor that might change the long-term strategic equation for the region. So let us start here. China has been increasing its military budget by 10% annually for the past 10 years. Beyond nuclear missiles and high-tech conventional weapons on land and in the air, China also plans to build a blue water navy capable of operating outside coastal waters. This clearly worries neighboring countries. What does it intend to do with all this power? We do not know. In March, China approved a law authorizing military action if Taiwan is too close to formal independence. The United States has said at various times it would protect Taiwan if attacked. Where might that lead? Tensions have increased in the Japan-China relationship. A Chinese submarine intruded into Japanese waters. Desperate for energy, China began drilling for natural gas just a couple of miles from Japan's exclusive economic zone. Violent anti-Japanese demonstrations have erupted in various cities, including Beijing. Such things do not happen in China without the government's permission. Is China going to stand against the United States and Japan? No, not necessarily. China has a great deal at stake economically. You frequently see headlines in the United States newspapers that say things like US flooded by imports from China. With annual growth that has averaged 9% for the past 25 years, with a population of 1.3 billion people, China is on the first economic treadmill. In order to sustain its current level of progress, China needs a world environment conducive to its economic development and trade. Since Japan and the United States are China's two largest trading partners, there are powerful economic forces that we hope will restrain any military impulse. The greatest unknown in East Asia is North Korea. We have seen hopeful signs in the nuclear talks in recent weeks. And let me tell you why this is so important. There is a remarkable satellite photo taken at night of the Korean Peninsula. South Korea glows with light emanating from the activities of its cities and towns. There is life. There's evidence of a civilized modern society. In dramatic contrast, the satellite photo shows that North Korea is totally dark. It is dark, not only because it does not have electricity to give its people light. Symbolically, it is dark because of the repression of its people. It is a land of labor camps the size of cities. It is a land where hunger affects millions and nepotism affects all. It is also a dark land because of the secrecy surrounding its intentions. North Korea fired a missile over Japanese territory in 1998. As I often tell people, imagine if Cuba fired a missile over Florida. The North also fired a short-range missile into the Sea of Japan. And hundreds of North Korean missiles can reach every major city in Japan. And another reason Japan remains suspicious of North Korea is because over the years, it has kidnapped Japanese citizens from their very own land and secretly taken them to the north. One writer in the Wall Street Journal went so far as to propose that China should invade North Korea on humanitarian grounds. This, the author argued, would reduce global tensions, bring justice to millions, and cement China's emergence as a great power. While no one takes such a proposal seriously, it indicates the level of frustration over the North's intransigence and repulsion over its disregard for humanity. It also indicates the hope for China becoming a stabilizing power in the region. So we have an emerging China and an erratic North Korea. Meanwhile, we see increased terrorism in Southeast Asia. Where does Japan fit into this picture? The Japan-US alliance was formed during the Cold War. A European friend said that the end of the Cold War is like the final act of Mozart's Don Giovanni. In that final act, after Don Giovanni is drawn into hell by the Stone Knight, Zelina and Mazzetto sing, "Let us go home and take supper." But in the aftermath of the Cold War, in the aftermath of September the 11th, we cannot simply go home and take supper. Our alliance remains more relevant than ever. Let me put Japan's role into historical perspective. This year is the 60th anniversary of the end of World War II. Prime Minister Koizumi recently again voiced Japan's profound remorse and heartfelt apology. I believe Japan is finally emerging from its post-war shock. Do you remember that the famous photograph during the Vietnam War of the Vietnamese girl walking down the road from her village, her arms out, the napalm having burned off all her clothes? It is a searing photograph. That is the way Japan felt after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And World War II reinforced our mutual affinity for turning inward. After our independence in 1952, Japan retained only a small-scale force, totally relying upon America to repel any major invasion. Japan also unequivocally chose to be a non-nuclear state, dependent upon the United States nuclear umbrella for deterrence, and we remain so to this very date. Never in history has a major economic power like Japan, the second largest economy in the world, so relied upon another country for its protection. That indicates the trust we have in America. Japan's military posture has remained exclusively defensive. For example, all of our 200 F-15s are interceptors. Not one is a striker bomber. In retrospect, the Gulf War back in the early 90s was the turning point away from our isolation. Since almost 90% of Japan's oil comes from the Gulf. Japan felt obliged to do something, so we raised the tax on gasoline and contributed $13 billion to the war effort. $13 billion. The result was a severe international criticism. The lesson was clear. Blood cannot be soothed by money. Money alone is not the substitute for the risk and sacrifice. Even before we Japanese became aware of it, the world had come to view us as a great power. This required a commensurate amount of international responsibility. As a result of all this, Japan began to rethink its global view. While keeping within our constitutional constraints and the pacifism of the people, the Japanese government began to expand Japan's international role in security matters. We have since been evolving from an introverted country to a more internationally confident one. First, since 1992, Japan has now participated in 7 United Nations peacekeeping missions, PKO. Japan sent peacekeeping forces to Cambodia, Rwanda, Mozambique, East Timor, and the Golan Heights of Syria, where they remain. The second, Japan has begun to share more responsibility for maintaining stability in East Asia. Relieved of the burden to defend against an enormous Soviet army close to our northern border, Japan could now look around its archipelago 360 degrees. If a conflict should break out anywhere in the vicinity, Japan would now assist the United States forces in the non-combatant activities. The third, September 11th, hit. It was a dark day for a friend and ally. Japan did not hesitate. We passed the necessary law and broke a half-century tradition. We deployed naval vessels and aircraft in support of US and Allied forces in Afghanistan. This was the first time since World War II that we dispatched forces to assist a military operation. In fact, we have supplied approximately 30 to 40% of all fuel consumed by US and Allied naval vessels in the campaign. And we are in the fight against terrorism in numerous other ways. Japan has frozen assets of over 4,000 terrorists or terrorist organizations. And the fourth, in Iraq, we are working to help the devastated country get back on its feet, politically, economically, and structurally. In addition to being the second largest donor in Iraqi reconstruction aid after the United States, we have sent Japanese self-defense forces. They provide medical and other humanitarian assistance, repair schools and roads, and help in other non-combatant activities to rebuild Iraq. Some are skeptical that freedom and democracy will work in the Middle East. The same was said of Japan. But the skepticism was proven wrong, and I believe it will be proven wrong in the Mid East too. And ladies and gentlemen, no matter where people live, they want freedom. They yearn for it. That yearning is universal. Japan and the United States share a global mission to spread the values of democracy, free markets, and human dignity. We also will continue to firmly maintain the Japan-US Security Alliance, which is the key to peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region. The world that Japan and the United States today inhabit is a world that would be much less stable if not for our alliance, our partnership, and our friendship. And ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of my government, I want you to know that Japan is proud to be America's ally, and we are proud to be America's friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Would you be willing to answer a few questions?
Yes. Shall I remain here?
Yeah, I think so. Well, thank you very much, Ambassador, for that very excellent Landon lecture and for bringing us up to date on the very important role that Japan plays in the world in 2005 and the 21st century. So he has certainly agreed to answer a few of your questions here. And per normal procedure, we have microphones set up on your right and on your left. And so the ambassador has said that he'd be very pleased to answer any questions that you might have. Okay, I think we have a question over here. Please.
Ambassador, recently Prime Minister Koizumi visited the Yoshikuni Shrine to the war dead. China and several other Asian nations protested this memorial to the World War II veterans and what they call war criminals. What is your opinion on these visits and how they affect foreign relations in Asia?
First, why Mr. Koizumi, the Prime Minister of Japan, has visited the Yasukuni Shrine? Well, he made it very clear that no intention whatsoever to glorify the past, the history of Japan, before and during the Second World War. No way. But just he would like to pay homage to those who lost their lives, the Japanese, 2 million Japanese who enshrined the Yasukuni, on the basis of their ultimate sacrifices. Today's prosperity of Japan is made possible. And he just would like to, through that kind of paying that kind of respect to the war deads in Japan, he would like to convince himself and the whole Japanese nationals that never Japan should go to war again. No turning back to the militarism, something like that. So, and I think over a certain period of time, the ripple will be stabilized, and Japan-China relationship, Japan-Korea relationship will come back to the normal. And I strongly hope so. In the case of Japan and China, for example, there's a tremendous complementarity of both our economies. And we share a great degree of common interest between China and Japan. So yeah, I hope it's a matter of time before the quite normalized relationship is seen between Japan and China. Japan and Korea as well.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, I think we have a question over here, please.
Mr. Ambassador, what do you see as the future of the Sakhalin Islands to the north?
Repeat that question, please.
What do you see as the future of the Sakhalin Islands to the north, ceded to the Soviet Union at the end of World War II?
Well, I anticipate quite a long negotiation with Russia. And this is not an easy issue. This is a territorial issue. I think Japan's claim over these 4 northern islands is a very legitimate one in accordance with the international law and rules and norms. But negotiation over the territory is never easy. And I hope, in the meantime, Japan-Russia relationship should become closer, more deeper one. Well, in between the United States and Japan, for example, the volume of trade, both ways, is somewhat around $200 billion a year. Compared to that, Japan-Russia economic relationship, trade, volume of the trade, is only $3.9 billion. 200 versus less than 4, 1/50th of our trade with the United States. I think this is much too low. While we are energetically continue negotiating on the territorial rights over these four islands, I would like to see the level of the relationship between Russia and Japan come closer to the level where it should be.
Well, actually, I've got a question. I've never asked a question in all these years of having Landon lectures up here. And Mr. Ambassador, Kansas is a major agricultural state, one of the top 5 food-producing states in the United States of America. And of course, we are a big-time agricultural leader in beef processing and wheat. We're actually #1 in America in both those areas. And I know that our bee people out there are wondering about the Japanese position on beef imports and what the future might hold there for Kansas and Japan.
Mr. President, thank you very much for asking that. Not easy question for me to answer. But I like to make myself as clear as possible. To put the conclusion first, the beef trade between Japan and the United States will be resumed very quickly. The already government, at the government levels, US government and Japanese government to government level, we have agreed to the conditions on which, and upon fulfillment of which, the beef trade will be resumed. We reached agreement October 23rd last year. Almost 1 year has passed since then. I think we have been taking a little bit too much time before seeing the beef trade resumed. However, I can tell you that way before the end of this calendar year, we will see beef trade between the United States and Japan resumed. Why it's taking so much time? Because the deliberation by the body called Food Safety Commission in Japan, Food Safety Commission, FSC, which is an independent body from the government of Japan, is taking quite a bit of time. And so forgive me for going into a little bit of the details. Japan, on September 10th, 2001, 1 day before September 11th, in New York, in Pentagon, Pennsylvania. On the previous day, we had the first outbreak of BSE. This BSE does not have anything to do with American beef. It was our beef, Japan's beef. However, as a result of this breakout of the first BSE, our consumption of beef, our own beef, dropped by 40%. To put the level of the consumption of beef by us back to the normal level, the government had decided and passed a law with which to establish an independent body called Food Safety Commission, which is responsible for risk assessment. So this doesn't have, as I mentioned earlier, this doesn't have anything to do with the American beef. This organization is created because of our BSE, our own BSE. However, as a matter of automaticity of this law, the rule is applied under that new piece of legislation. Rule has to be applied to all beef, any beef, from wherever, Australia, United States, Canada, China, and so forth. And unfortunately, in December 2003, the outbreak, there was, one BSE case was discovered in the United States, in the state of Washington. This is not really American beef, it was a Canadian beef. But because of the automaticity of law, this very stringent rule had to be applied to the US and import of US beef to Japan. Ever since then, the government and both governments have negotiated and consulted with each other so that the cattle, which is under 20 months of age, will be okay to be imported to Japan. But this government agreement, by virtue of Japan's and the new piece of legislation, has to be endorsed by the Independent Food Safety Commission. And their deliberation is taking a bit more time than I have originally imagined. But that deliberation is in the very final stage. On the 24th of October, in about a week's time, in 6 days' time, there will be a critical meeting of the FSC will be held. And as a perhaps as an outcome of that, either on that very day or a week later, on the 31st of October, the Food Safety Commission's deliberation will be completed in favor of the agreement and reached between the two governments. So then that's the foundation, the base, why I think the resumption of the beef trade is very close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bass. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for not only your outstanding presentation, but for being willing to answer some very tough questions. And I think you can see from his presentation here this afternoon why relations between America and Japan are the best they've ever been in the history of American-Japanese diplomatic relations. When he opens his comments by saying that America is the best friend that Japan has in the world today, I think you get the idea. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there's one other person that I wanted to introduce here today, and some of you might know her, Mrs. Ono. Mrs. Ono, would you please stand up? She's back there. Many of you might not know this, but her dear spouse, Mitsugi Ono, was a master glassblower here at Kansas State University in the chemistry department for over a generation. And you can see some of his exquisite works in the Student Union, on the White House, and other just very, very beautiful glass pieces. Well, for Chuck Reagan and me, we had an opportunity to go to Tokyo in 1992 and present the Hamaji Castle that Mr. Ono had crafted as a master glassblower, and we were able to present that in person to the Emperor of Japan. And so that was a definite thrill, and we certainly thank Mr. Ono, and I know the whole chemistry department feels a great debt of gratitude to Mr. Ono for his very elegant and outstanding work in and outside of the chemistry department for over a generation. Well, we are having 2 more Landon lectures for this fall, 2005. At our next Landon lecture, we're going to have Mr. Mikhail Gorbachev, who is the Communist Party secretary from 1985 to 1991. And so I think you want to keep that date in mind. We're looking forward to having Mikhail Gorbachev here to give a Landon lecture. And then shortly thereafter, Mr. Ted Turner, who founded CNN and, of course, a whole telecommunications empire. He's going to be here in November. So I think we have 2 rather brilliant Landon lectures to look forward to in addition to this outstanding Landon presentation today. So thank you for coming for this afternoon lecture, and I thank you very much, and goodbye and good night. Thank you. Thank you very much.